Hey everybody, welcome back to the Contrarians. We've been on a bit of a roll with our regular version of the show where one of us sits in the hot seat and basically picks a dark horse album from a band and champions that album as that band's best or one of their favorite records from that band. So today we have definitely a contrarian choice from Martin with a really cool band that's been around a long time, put out a lot of great records, had a lot of hits, and that band is Heart. And I'm going to throw it over to Martin to give us a bit of a history and let us know what his contrarian pick is.
Yes, thanks very much, Marco. So yeah, just give you a brief history of Heart. So this is a band that goes back to 1975 for the first album. Oddly, growing up as a kid, Canada kind of claimed them a little bit as their own, even though they're more of a U.S. and Canadian consortium. They were signed to a Canadian label up here, Mushroom, and they moved to Vancouver. I'm not sure how long they stay in Vancouver or where the back and forth is, but they record in Vancouver as well. So they always felt like a kind of a Canadian band, and they actually sound a little bit like a Canadian band. I don't know why I would say that, but having the strong female vocals, the kind of folkiness to them, Canada has a bit of a history with that. But anyways, yeah, just to roll through some of the albums here. I won't hold them all up, but we start with Dreamboat Annie. That record 75 went platinum eventually. We've got Magazine in there, Little Queen. We've got Dog and Butterfly. By this point they're up to double platinum. So they're having a great 70s. 1980, Baby Lestrange goes gold. Then we've got a bit of a fallow period for them. This is the Notorious. I love this album, but this was 1982 was considered not a success, and it wasn't a success. It didn't certify at all. But then you get up to Passionworks and into kind of the big 80s years, which I'm not a big fan of. This kind of Heart, Bad Animals, Brigade period. Kind of the only part of the Heart catalog that I'm not a big fan of, but we'll talk about that a little bit. So yeah, this is a band. Obviously, Ann and Nancy Wilson. Nancy is guitarist. Ann is the main lead vocalist, but Nancy sings as well. A bunch of guys in the band. They have a kind of a big switch over at one point where some of the guys get shuffled in and out of the band. But it's always Ann and Nancy Wilson. But they have this big second wind during the 80s, and then we get into kind of a situation where you've got these sorts of albums in the 90s where they and beyond where they get, what is that one? Okay, so we've got Jupiter Darling and Red Velvet Car, Fanatic, where they get really good again. I mean, these records are all very critically acclaimed. I mean, obviously, the bloom is off sales wise. They're now kind of a classic rock act at this point, right? But essentially, these albums are really well regarded. Fanatic everybody loved Fanatic. But basically, and then they have kind of a redo album, Beautiful Broken, later on. But like a lot of these 70s bands, they really have this career arc where, the early stuff is the golden period and everybody loves it. And they were actually a very successful band in the 70s. Then they do the 80s thing, and they probably do it even further in that direction. I'm really not a fan of those records, but they're almost like a Cheap Trick. Marco and I did the Cheap Trick episode, right, with Busted. They kind of go that far, or say Aerosmith with what they did in the 90s. So they adopt a lot of 80s tropes during those records, but those records are huge. The self-titled album from 85 went 5 times platinum. Bad Animals went 3 times platinum. Brigade in 1990 was 2 times platinum. So they were actually bigger in that mid 80s to 1990 period than they even were in the 70s, when they were more analog and Zeppelin-esque and folky and hard rock and funky and really classic rock sounding in the 70s. So there's kind of your survey of the band. Great institution. I guess I'm not sure I said this or not, but essentially Seattle based, right? Essentially a Northwest band, but that Seattle to Vancouver access sort of thing. So My favorite Hard album, and I know this is a very contrarian choice, but I've thought about this long and hard and compared it with my second favorite, which would be Baby Lestrange. I've often called Baby Lestrange my favorite Hard album, but I took a really good look, and it is Passionworks. 1983, August 20th, 1983. Now, this is their last record for Epic, and that's kind of part of the problem with this. The previous album had really bombed. Private Audition was not a big record for them. But the crazy thing about this album is I really think it sounds like an album full of smash hits, yet it didn't even certify at all. It's not gold, it's not platinum. And, a lot of the consensus out there is that CBS just didn't care about them anymore, Epic CBS, and it just wasn't really promoted well enough. But yeah, just a little more about this album. So it's produced by Keith Olsen, who's coming off of, he had some early success with Fleetwood Mac and made a lot of money off of that. I can tell you stories about from Bill Electric Church in the Sammy Hagar band saying like he was building this massive house when they were recording the Sammy Hagar stuff. But anyway, so he's coming off of some records that kind of lead up to the great sound of this record, which I'll describe in a second. Babies, Union Jacks, Pat Benatar, Precious Time was in 81. Sammy Hagar is now signed to Geffen. So Keith has done Standing Hampton and Three Lock Box, and Sammy has a big hit. Keith is also doing Rick Springfield, couple in a row there. In 82, it was Success Hasn't Spoiled Me Yet. But essentially, all of that kind of stuff combined leads up a little bit to the sound of Passionworks, for better or worse. And I'm thinking it's for better because what this record sounds like to me is a nice bridge transition album between classic rock heart and the 80s stuff. And it's a little bit of the best of both worlds, although one could argue that, most hardcore Heart fans are going to only go for the classic rock era and pick something like a Dog and Butterfly or, like I say, I really like Baby Lestrange as well. But an interesting thing happens here. So Steve Fossen is replaced by Mark Andes on bass. Mike DeRozier is replaced by Denny Carmassi on drums. Denny, you know him, you love him from Montrose, but just previous to this, he was on all three of those Gamma albums. So he's coming from this cool, smart, rockin', Ronnie Montrose vehicle into this band. And apparently Denny was really wily about joining this band. They were really, their stock had fallen a lot because of Private Audition. And I believe he got some kind of like key ownership position when he's joining the band. He's only the drummer. He's not going to be writing songs, but Heart absolutely took off, and that investment for Denny paid off in spades. So apparently Denny did rather well joining Heart, which is really cool. But just to not leave Denny for a second. So this album is like I say, it's using some of the 80s tropes, but it's before it gets really bad for anybody. And it gets really bad for Heart, believe me. But he's in here playing a tight kind of economical drum performance. You get a little bit of electronic tom-tom sound, which I'm fine with. To me, this is like almost like the last time electronic drums were kind of done properly. I often speak of Golden Earring using electronic drums to great effect, but I think Denny's drums sound great on here, and I don't mind that they're 80s sorts of drums. Okay, so to tell you why I like this album. So I go through the songs and I really like everything on it except for somewhat 3 songs, and even those 3 I don't mind too much. Kicks off with How Can I Refuse, which should have been a smash single. Gorgeous heavy song with kind of a hiccup beat to it. Really neat, kind of like a counter playing melodies. The other thing about this record throughout is Anne's vocal performance. This is one of her greatest vocal performances of all time across this whole record. But that song should have been bigger. And speaking about this idea of this album not being a big hit, up here in Canada, it went to number 7 on the charts. So it felt a lot more pervasive here in Canada than I think it felt in the States, where it only went to 39 on the charts. They're writing everything on this with a good friend of the band, Sue Ennis. So Sue is in on all the songwriting as well, or most of the songwriting. But essentially, it's an in-house project, which is nice. Blue guitar is really cool. It's kind of got a big heroic chorus. It's a mellow one, but it's got, picks up with the like tragic fire, like holy desire part in it. Is really cool. Johnny Moon is one of my least favorite ones on it. It's a little bit sort of cinematic, like a cheesy sort of 80s movie. Sleep Alone is a great rocker with the nobody meant to sleep alone kind of big anthemic chorus on it. Anne's really like angry and giving her on it. Together Now is this cool kind of Led Zeppelin-ish sort of song where it stops and then it's just Anne over guitar, which is kind of cool. It's got this sort of Styx-like chorus to it. Allies, big ballad on here. Like I really hate all those later Heart ballads, but this is the last one where it feels like a really good song. Now this is written by Jonathan Cain, Babies into Journey, right? But that's fine. It's still a great song, and it's got a great chorus on it, and an excellent Anne performance. Jealousy is kind of a quirky one, not one of my favorites, but it's kind of like cool and dark, and it's got some tough tones to it. It's very rhythmic. But the thing I think people forget about this record, I think almost like the next 3 tracks on side 2 are the best songs on the whole album, other than maybe How Can I Refuse. But Heavy Heart, with that great chorus, it's kind of like a moody, building, romantic sort of song. Love Mistake, Nancy sings this one, and that also should have been a huge hit. Really nice Nancy performance on that, but just a good mellow tune. And Language of Love, same thing. You got Anne and Nancy doing some vocals together. But just a really a good performance of a mellow Heart song. So those 3 in a row are 3, probably my 2, 3, and 4 favorites on the entire album. Language of Love, they actually redid on Beautiful Broken, that redo album that they did, which is, quote unquote, their last studio album. And then it closes with Ambush, which is kind of like a 80s trope techno, hard rock, funky sort of thing, synth pop in a way. Not my favorite song on the album, but again, some cool experimental things on it. So there you go. I mean, I just think it's a really consistent album. And, if anybody's going to accept 80s tropes and 80s sounds, I think here it's still tasteful, because it's 1983. This comes out in the summer of 83. So it's made earlier in 83. Things have not gotten out of control yet. And I think it's just a tasteful, economic, tough, no bones, spare, guitar-y, but very varied in terms of the songwriting version of Heart. So it's definitely standing alone. Nothing sounds like this. Private Audition sounds nothing like this. And the next album start using those 80s tropes, and I think they sound terrible, and I don't like them at all for 3 records in a row kind of thing. But love this album to death. Like I say, it was always close between that and Baby Lestrange for me, but love Passionworks. I think that's all I have to say. Marco, tell me how I'm wrong.
Yeah, just like on a subjective level, for me, just going and listening to this record, I find like my problem with it is that, and this is just my ears, but I find it's not very hooky. Like I find there's not a lot of songs that really caught my attention in like a hooky type of way. For example, like with the ballad Allies, like yeah, it's a power ballad. I'm not even like that against power ballads, but for example, like when Whitesnake does like Is This Love, and I know you hate Is This Love, but for me, like Is This Love has like a big hook to it and it sounds like a hit. Allies just kind of didn't do anything for me. In fact, I liked Johnny Moon better than Allies. And not because of this, but Johnny Moon just seemed, I don't know if it was content-wise, but it just seemed, it's not a heavy song, but it seemed heavy. It almost sounded like the way like Dio would do a mellow song, Johnny Moon to me. So I kind of dug that a little bit better than Allies. But for the most part, like Love Mistake is a gem, right? But I find a lot of the songs on the record are kind of like either simple or just generic, I guess. Nothing on this really hit me. Coming from a band like Heart, and you said like afterwards they really started sounding 80s and stuff like this. But man, like their next record, they had tons of hits all over that record. But previous to this, I mean, other than Private Audition, they had tons of hits all over the place. Like it just didn't really sound like there was any peak on this record for me. Like even with the the track How Can I Refuse, which I liked it, but I just didn't find it. The album in general felt kind of flat to me. Some of the comments I've seen in terms of like production wise online is I've seen some reviews criticize it for sounding dated or sounding too 80s. I don't necessarily hear that. That's not my issue with it, but that's something I've seen. And you said they went on, you know, of course they went on to be even one of the bigger 80s bands in the world, right?
Yeah.
If you look at like commercial success, they definitely took a dip. Like they almost, with this record and Private Audition, it's almost like they took a break of having massive success to put out a couple of bad records and then go back to having massive success. So if you look at like the platinum and gold record sales, it's like going up and then it just crashes for these two records and then goes back up again. So it's almost like they took a break on this one. And between the two, Private Auditions and Passionworks actually charted lower and had a lower charting single than Private Audition, believe it or not. Some of the other stuff I came across, so in terms of like ranking consensus, yeah, the top records that I saw constantly were Dreamboat Annie, Little Queen, Dog and Butterfly, and then sometimes you would see the self-titled Heart kind of float in there around like number 4, but some other records kind of floated in and out, but those were always the top 3. Louder Sounds Guide to Heart's Best Albums doesn't even list Passionworks. They list about 9 albums that if you want to get into Heart, you should check them out. Passionworks isn't even on the list. Return of Rock did not even have Passionworks in their top 10 of Heart albums ranked, with Dreamboat Annie, Little Dog, Dog and Butterfly, and Little Queen coming in as 1, 2, and 3. Ultimate Classic Rocks, Passionworks was number 12 of their albums ranked, with Little Queen, Dog and Butterfly, Dreamboat Annie being 1, 2, and 3. Ranker, which of course is fan consensus, so fans are going on or users are going on and voting. So this isn't critical consensus, or this isn't one guy in his apartment making up a list of what he thinks is the best Heart albums. But Ranker had Dreamboat Annie, Little Queen, Dog and Butterfly, 1, 2, and 3. Passionworks coming in around 10, at number 10. Best ever albums, which is more subjective, so this isn't critics either. This is more of a, objective view of different rankings lists and compiling all the information. They had Passionworks at 18, but they also include compilation records and live stuff. But again, number 1, 2, and 3, Dreamboat Annie, Heart, and Dog and Butterfly were 1, 2, and 3. Sea of Tranquility, they did a ranking list. They had Passionworks at number 9, with Dreamboat Annie number 1, Little Queen number 2, Dog and Butterfly number 3. So like all over the place, even when you look at compilation records. So they put out a couple of greatest hits records. One of them was called These Dreams. There was nothing from Passionworks on that.
Right.
Most of the stuff, there was 3 tracks from Dreamboat Annie and 5 tracks from Heart on there, and some other tracks from other records. Passionworks wasn't even, there was no representation from Passionworks on These Dreams. Greatest Hits, which combines all the hits from 75 to 83, only had the 1 track, How Can I Refuse, from Passionworks, with 3 tracks from Dreamboat Annie and 4 from Little Queen. So it's like critical consensus in terms of ranking is down on the record. Fans are down on the record. The band themselves is down on the record. Live set list stuff. Passionworks was the 10th most represented album live, with How Can I Refuse being the top song that they played from Passionworks. And then, of course, the top records being Dreamboat Annie, Little Queen, Dog and Butterfly. Like that's the consensus that you see, is usually it's those 3 records, which even Heart coming in with the self-titled pretty high too, because that was a massive success with tons of hits on that one. Just to go through a couple of critical reviews, AllMusic gave it 3 stars. It isn't in class with Dreamboat Annie, Little Queen, Bad Animals, or Heart. Most of the songs that follow How Can I Refuse aren't strong. Passionworks isn't recommended to casual listeners. Rolling Stone gave it 2 stars. Basically, they summed it up and said, in short, Passionworks sounds like a soundtrack to an off-Broadway show that closed after 2 nights. Almost totally lacking in hummable tunes and danceable rhythm. A good review, a bad review I found on Blog Critics was Passionworks is of the second of 2 average at best albums by Heart. Anytime a band releases an album to fulfill a contract, a warning flag is raised. 3 decades later, it is still unknown if Hart was serious about the album's music or was just going through the motions. Whatever their motivation, the group created one of the weaker albums of their career. He names a few songs, but he says he likes Allies and How Can I Refuse, and states most of the rest of the songs range from album filler, like Love, Mistake, and Language of Love, to downright embarrassing, like Johnny Moon. It's funny because a couple of songs he mentioned are ones that I actually liked, but Rate Your Music gives Passionworks an average rating of 3 stars. So here's a couple of quick quotes from fans from Rate Your Music. Blue Guitar is a very listenable track, but most of Passionworks is passionless. Gone is that great 70s vibe that they want that fades. Sad. Passionworks brings trouble. They're aiming for 80s slickness, and this puttered to about halfway before it sputtered. Some painful stuff lurks within, and the electric drums clash with the rock songs in an unpleasant manner. None of the songs on here sound especially personal, introspective, or anything like that. And at this point in their careers, I have to conclude nobody in Hart, except seldomly, had a great ear for an above average hook. And then I'll finish with actually a quote from Ann Wilson herself. So they had put out a record called Beautiful Broken, where they had re-recorded some of their stuff from that early 80s period, including from Baby Lestrange and private auditions. But basically, she kind of went on to say that, I'll just read the quote to you. Wow, those songs were so misunderstood production-wise. A clumsy little transitional era of analog transitioning into digital technology, which was sounding a lot more solid state instead of warm and velvety like analog and physical tape used to sound before that. Some of the bigger hits that we've had from the 70s, they don't need any kind of facelift, I don't think. They still play really well. A couple of the 80s ones, referring to Private Audition and Passionworks, those ones we sort of had to retweak. So even she kind of talks about the problems with the production. And there was other comments I had seen online about the production sounding too 80s or whatever. But that kind of sums up all the research and my subjective view on it. Did you have any response to any of that?
Yeah, I mean, Private Audition is actually really homespun sounding, but Anne neglects to mention the rest of the records of the 80s are atrocious sounding. They're terrible sounding records, right? So this is at least, like I say, in the wheelhouse. It's funny you didn't mention this at all because this was so close, and I did check like before we did this episode. I did check where this. I was curious to see where this lands, and it lands kind of 5-ish, 6-ish. Along, in the catalog. But yeah, I've always really had a soft spot for this record as well. I'll just mention a few fans that I saw some interesting things. Love Mistake, a fan writes, the crown jewel of this album. If you thought Nancy sounded beautiful on Heart's These Dreams, you'll be blown away by this number. This song should have been a #1 smash hit. Nancy sounds so sweet and vulnerable on this. I'd love to see her sing this live. Heavy Heart, a beautiful and somber number. Great chorus with some of the best lyrics on the album. Beat by Jealousy, I thought this was pretty interesting. Another great song that fits in well with the feel of this album. With the exception of Johnny Moon, every song in this album fits together like a puzzle. Kind of odd. I always thought Ann and Nancy were going through a very emotional time to write songs like this. I think it is a very emotional album. Together Now, great harmony during the chorus. Ann and Nancy always sounded especially spectacular together as a duet. This song highlights them. Ambush, a bit of a rocker to close the album out, not as fast as Kick It Out. This kind of getting this wrong, but a strong number just the same. And sounds frisky and sly on this one, very sexy. So yeah, I mean, I like I say, I mean, I've had this odd thing maybe in recent years where I've shifted to some of these later albums from these catalogs. I recognize going back and taking a really good listen to Dreamboat Annie, the debut. What a great debut from this band. I mean, they were really on their game like immediately. But they paid their dues as well. They really kind of honed their craft before they got going with the whole folk, Zeppelin, hard rock, like I say, a little bit of pump rock to them as well. But no, I think that's about it. I mean, obviously, yeah, this really did turn out to be a contrarian choice, and I certainly didn't force it at all because I play this record all the time. I really love it. I mean, especially with How Can I Refuse, which I think was a great. Like I say, I think a big problem with this record. I would surmise that people would have looked on it a lot more fondly had it been a bigger record, and it would have been a bigger record. But I think people basically think that the label didn't promote it. They had no love for Heart because they're leaving the label, and it just kind of got lost in the shuffle and wasn't promoted. But Columbia, Sony, Epic, epic, I guess, could have had a huge hit with this album. But again, you know, if you go out and promote this album and turn it into a big hit, you're still not building for the future. The future is they're leaving. And you know, I mean, obviously no one knew what was going to happen, whether they were going to be big or not. But with them leaving, it's like, even if they built this record into a success, it doesn't feel like, you know, the label's got anything really to work for if they don't have the next bunch of records. So there you go, folks. Go play some Heart. Go check this stuff out. We will leave it at that. Marco, I guess we've got Patreon stuff going on all the time. You've been really good at doing the exclusive stuff for the Patreon folks. So if you want to see some of the things we've been doing over there, it's been pretty lively. Join Patreon, and also comment below. Let us know what you think. That's our favorite part of this whole thing, is reading all these comments and getting feedback on all this and starting a discussion. So yeah, Marco, anything left to say, or what do you think?
No, just, yeah, like you said, like our Patreon is really blowing up right now. I mean, like we have like actual full bonus episodes on Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool. We're doing some stuff, like recording stuff with the Patreon members. So there's a really cool community there. We're always commenting on stuff there and checking stuff out there. So if you want to give us a like and subscribe here, that's always cool. If you want to support us on Patreon, if you can, like that's really cool too. But other than that, I guess we'll agree to disagree, and we'll live on to fight another day, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely.
That's it, dude.